Segment 4, the Arab Spring. Tunisia, December 17th, a street vendor named Mohamed Bouazizi protests the harassment he receives at the hands of a police officer by dousing himself with gasoline and committing suicide. Mass demonstrations, governments overthrown in Tunisia, in Egypt, a civil war in Libya, unrest in Bahrain, Yemen, Syria. Fouad, contrast, compare, to what extent are they different, to what extent are they similar? This Arab Spring with the Velvet Revolution in Eastern Europe in 1989.
I wish you were there today. We had a Hoover retreat, and Mohamed Bouazizi, this young vendor, was my prime exhibit number one. And what's interesting about Mohamed Bouazizi, what's tragic about this young vendor, is what he said to the police officer. You're right, it was a police officer, but it's also significant. It was a police woman, because Tunisia has a kind of a history of women emancipation because of Habib Bourguiba, the old ruler after independence. So he turns to this policewoman who is taking away, confiscating a box of his apples and then another. And he said, "Why are you doing this to me? I'm a simple man and I just want to work." And then he wets himself. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, when you think of it. Then he applies paint thinner to his body, and he goes in front of the municipality and sets himself ablaze and sets the Arab world, if you will, metaphorically ablaze. And he does this on December 17, as you said. On January 14, the ruler in Tunisia, Zain al-Abidin bin Ali, makes a run for it with his wife. About 10 or so days later, Egypt erupts, because in many ways the Egyptians felt, look at the Tunisians. You know, we're Egypt, we're the center of the Arab world, the trendsetter of the Arab world. And this revolt happens in Tunisia, skips Libya, comes to Egypt, and once it's in Egypt, it has a theater worthy of its ambitions. It has a big Arab theater. You know, the Arabs call Cairo, and its amazing expression, Dunya, the mother of the world. That's like, this is the great Arab city.
I like that even better than the Big Apple.
Oh,
from
yeah.
New York, right?
No, this is really...
This is serious.
You know, look, Islam fashioned a civilization in Cairo, outwitted and outweighted conquerors. This is my expression about Egypt. Once you are in Liberation Square, once 1 million Egyptians come out into the streets and demand that Pharaoh be gone, you know, then the chant echoes in the Arab world. And it's a very interesting chant. It's very rhythmic. Like you can almost you can sort of go to bed saying the same thing. Ash-Sha'b, you read, Isqat al-Nidam, the people want to bring down the regime. This begins in Egypt, goes to Libya, goes to Syria, goes to Yemen, goes to Bahrain. And I think what this young man, Mohamed Bouazizi, this tragic figure in this young Tunisian with his fruit cart and vegetable cart, he exposed the problems of the Arab world, the kleptocracies, the thieves who were at the head of these Arab states.
Well, that's tremendously moving.
Yeah, absolutely.
I now turn to Ambassador Hill for the realistic, to bring us to confront us with the reality.
This Arab Spring is it's a world historical event. Hegel, the philosopher, said that history is the history of the consciousness of freedom. That people are thinking more and more about freedom. What we see here is suddenly a new population. We had not seen this population in the Middle East before. We had seen the followers of the regime and the henchmen and the thugs of the strongmen, and we had seen the fanatical terrorists, Islamists, but we had not seen these people. And suddenly there they are, and they are Muslim, and they are Middle Eastern, and they have a completely different agenda.
Harry Jaffa, the great scholar of the Declaration of Independence and Lincoln, Harry Jaffa uses the phrase of the Declaration of Independence. He said, on this program, seated right there, he said it represents one of the few genuine shifts in human consciousness.
Yes.
Same of the Arab Spring?
That's true. But in this case, the Arab Spring is being crushed. It's losing it all across the region, maybe not everywhere, but those who care about freedom and support it are not winning this at the moment.
Okay, you're surprising me a little bit. I thought you had a somewhat darker view from Fouad's. Actually, you share Fouad's view
It's pretty
of
dark
what it could
because
have
we're
meant,
not-
but
it's
you're
not
saying
going-
something. The initial impulse, you share Fouad's view, is actually quite moving and beautiful
It's
in its
moving.
way. But what happens next
What
is...
happens next is it's going to hell, because primarily, frankly, it's because the United States has stepped back from supporting freedom and democracy. And when we do that, when we do things such as the speech of the president on the Arab Spring that climaxed with the question of the Israeli-Palestinian situation, it turned the whole narrative back to 1975, when there's a new narrative that didn't say death to America or all that matters are the Palestinians. It was an entirely new freedom agenda that we have just stepped away from.
The Obama administration says over and over and over again that in this, that, and the other diplomatic matter, it's seeking a reset. It had a genuine reset, a genuine moment of newness, and turned its back on it.
That's right.
Is that right? Fouad, let me quote to you your friend and mentor and hero, I think, in some intellectual hero, Bernard Lewis. This is a quotation he gave to the Jerusalem Post. In Egypt, the religious parties have an immediate advantage. First, they have a network of communication through the preacher and the mosque. No other political tendency can hope to equal. The language of Western democracy is for the most part newly translated and not intelligible to the great masses. In genuinely free and fair elections, that's something we're all in favor of, genuinely free and fair, the Muslim parties are very likely to win, and that would be a disaster. So don't hold... Bernard Lewis says... Right. Don't hold genuinely free and fair elections.
Well, I take issue a little bit with this. I take this moment in Arab life as, this is the 1989 of the Arabs, Peter. This is 1989. This is what 1989 was to the communist world. Now, there are people who will tell you that you can't have an Arab Spring, that the Arab world has two seasons, winter and summer. So there is a kind of a view that you can't really go for liberty in the Arab world, because liberty will mean the victory of one man, one vote, one time, that the Islamists will win. I don't think it's necessarily so. I hold a very complex view of Egypt. I think Bernard is right. I mean, there is a very strong Islamic theocratic current in Egypt. There's also a very strong democratic current in Egypt, a memory of democracy in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s before the free officers. And there is a figure I like very much, and I think our viewers will relate to him better than they do to the Islamists. A young man named Wa'il Ghunaim, a Google executive who led the Facebook protest in Egypt. So Egypt has everything. This Egyptian revolt of the 28th of January, when millions of Egyptians, after Friday prayers, came out into the street and demanded the departure of Pharaoh. It's a revolution of 1,000 discontents. They're liberals, they're theocrats, they're people who believe in the rule of the military. And I think Egypt will treat us to the variety of Arab political life and Arab attitudes.
Egypt will not be captured by the Muslim Brotherhood?
I think it could be. I think, again, we can, as in Afghanistan, the other cases, if we are active, if we are engaged, if we manage this as only the United States can do, we can see this thing through to a successful outcome, even if that's only a plateau before going to another stage. But if
Charlie,
we
don't
do
you know
this,
that Americans are tired? From the middle of the Second World War through the Cold War, it was, history has given us this responsibility. No one else can do this or this or this. No one else can secure peace in the Pacific and represent a counterpoise to a rising China, is what we're being told. No one else could guarantee the freedom of Western Europe and contain the Soviet Union in war after war and conflict after conflict. And now you're saying no one else is in a position to advance the Arab Spring and encourage democracy. We've had enough, Charlie. We've just had enough.
Americans aren't tired. Only anchormen are tired.
All right.